Hey everyone, Andrew here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Myth Adventure series by Robert Aspirin. I stumbled across this series about 10-15 years ago, and it's a really bizarre fantasy comedy series. It's a little goofy, a little out there. And I'm just going to talk about the first 4 books, and then brief over the rest of the series. The book series is about 21 books. I've read about 16 of them, but those first 4 are strong, and I really want to talk about each of them. At least a little bit. So, the first book is called Another Fine Myth, which is a parody of the old comedy routine of this is another fine mess you've gotten us into. And yeah, for an opening first book of a series to be called Another Fine Myth is very bizarre. And even Aspirin himself is like, yeah, I probably should have saved that for the second book. It's not a bad title. It's interesting. It definitely sticks out in my mind as a title. So, we start out with the first book. We are introduced to Skeeve, and Skeeve is a magician's apprentice, and who has a very strong desire to be a thief because he wants money and power and respect. And his first time trying to rob someone turned out to be this magician's hut by a magician named Garkin. And Garkin convinced Skeeve to give up on his thieving ways and become his apprentice. A year into his training, Skeeve is a little disillusioned and a little tired of it, because a year in and he can light candles on fire and, make a feather float. And so he's like, no, I'm gonna stop doing this. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna become a thief. And Garkin's like, why would you want to do that? You can do so much as a magician. There is so much more available to you. And Skeeve's like, sure. And Garkin's like, all right, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the true powers of a magician. I'm going to show you how to summon a demon. So he starts the summoning circle, and during the summoning, an assassin barges into the hut and shoots down Garkin with a crossbow. Garkin manages to use a little bit of magic and kills the assassin, which now leaves Skeeve alone with this tall, green-scaled, smiling demon, who turns out to be an old friend of Garkin's. His name is Oz, short for Osmundius. And it's spelled A-A-H-Z, and Skeeve is like, Oz? O-Z? And Oz is like, no relation. And Skeeve's like, relation to who? Or what? So it turns out that Oz is a demon, but demon is a slang term for someone who travels between dimensions. That there are thousands of different dimensions with hundreds of races, and that this is specifically a backwater one known as Claw. Oz is from a one known as Perv, supposedly very high in magic and technology. Thus, they refer to themselves as the Pervex, even though every other universe refers to them as the Perverts, which is a long-running joke in the series. Every single time he meets a new person from somewhere, they're like, you're that pervert! And he's like, perfect. But yeah. And Skeeve, being from Claw, means he is a clod. Yeah. And Oz is also a magician, and he and Garkin are old friends, and they would do this thing whenever any of their apprentices start to question the faith or start to be a little disheartened, to summon each other and use that to scare the apprentice straight. Oz decides that, okay, well, Garkin's dead, the assassin's dead, I'm just gonna go home. Tries to use his magic and can't. So, like, Garkin and Oz would play practical jokes on each other. And so Garkin this time used a powder that would make Oz unable to use his magic for a minimum of 1,000 years. Yeah, so now Oz is stranded on Claw. He decides he's going to take Skeeve on as his apprentice, and they're going to go out and see if find a way to get Oz off planet. During their travels, they find out there are more assassins that are trailing them, and end up in a fight alongside a demon hunter by the name of Quigley, who is fighting a battle unicorn named Buttercup. And Quigley tells them that these assassins were hired by a master magician known as Istvan. And Oz has met Istvan before. Istvan has this very big plan. He wants to conquer all of the universes. And Oz knows now that he and Skeeve have to do something, have to stop Istvan from fulfilling his evil desires. So they end up traveling to the nearest town, and Oz teaches Skeeve how to use deception magic and makes it so that you can warp people's perception using his own imagination. So Skeeve transforms Oz to look like a regular human. And they go and talk to a bunch of the sellers at in this town, and they end up finding a magical item. They find a D-hopper, which is a dimensional hopper for people that can't use magic. And Oz tries to swindle the price down. The seller says no, kicks Oz and Skeeve out, so Oz and Skeeve decide they're going to break in and steal the item. They do so, and the seller turns up dead, and the townspeople capture Oz and Skeeve and then hang Oz. Being perfect, Oz doesn't use his throat muscles the way we do, so he's able to withstand the hanging and manages to break free, and him and Skeeve use the D-hopper to escape to the planet Deva, which is known as the Grand Bazaar planet. It has literally every magical item, every magical device known to. It's the biggest selling area in all of the universes. Deva is run by the Devils. Oz does a really good job of summing them up. It's like they are traders, they are negotiators, they love to negotiate and love to make arguments, and it's like Oz describes them as like, if you think you've made a good deal with a Devil, count your fingers, and then your limbs, and then your family members, because something's missing. Oz decides to go off and find the items to win on his own, and leaves Skeeve to tell him to stay out of trouble. Skeeve, being a human-ish person on a magic bizarre planet, of course, instantly runs into trouble. The first thing he ends up doing is he ends up running into this dragon trainer who has a very young baby dragon named Gleep. He gets named Gleep because that's all he can say. And him and Skeeve end up catching eyes, and they end up bonding to each other in the can never break this kind of way, which enrages the dragon trainer and demands that he get paid compensation for having you just ruined my dragon that I'm supposed to sell to Blankenwig. So Skeeve now has his own pet dragon, and he ends up encountering this beautiful goddess woman with green hair named Tananda, or Tanda. Tanda turns out to be a con artist and a former assassin, and she's from the planet Trollia, where the males of Trollia are called trolls, and the females are called trollops. And she's been running with this pack of ruffians, shaking down tourists at the bazaar for money. Oz ends up coming to Skeeve's rescue, and Tananda and Oz turn out to be old buddies, and she turns on those con artists and agrees to help Oz and Skeeve defeat Istvan. So they travel from the bazaar back to Claw. When they arrive on Claw, they run into Quigley, and him and Buttercup agree to join them. They all go to defeat Istvan, who's been living at this inn, and they end up getting overthrown pretty quickly. But Oz manages to trick Istvan into drinking tainted wine that has been doused with the same powder that had been used on Oz. So now Istvan can't use his own magic. Istvan decides that he's going to take Tananda and Quigley as leverage and demands that Oz give him his D-hopper. Oz gives him the D-hopper and they disappear. And Skeeve's like, oh no, what do we do? And Oz is just like, it's fine. because he'd messed with that D-hopper. To use a D-hopper, you spin dials to line up to create the pathway that you want. He'd taken a knife and changed a bunch of the symbols around, type of thing. So it sent them off anywhere. And it's like, Tonda has her own magic, so she can get away from them and escape at any point she wants. But now they're trapped in an unknown part of the universe, which leaves Skeeve and Oz alone in this now abandoned inn, which they take over, and Oz begins to teaching Skeeve how to do more intense magic. And that's how book 1 ends. And we go straight into book 2, which is Mythconceptions. So book 2 takes place about 3 months down the line. Okay, so a royal summoner comes from the kingdom of Posselton and says that they have heard of rumors of a wizard at the end, and Skeeve's like, I guess that's me. And it's like, all the big wizards have been called to the kingdom of Posselton to audition to be the new court magician for the kingdom of Posselton. And Skeeve doesn't really want to do this. It's like, I literally don't stand a chance. And I was like, you know, the thing about this type of position and this type of thing is, like, it's really good money, which is what is driving Oz, because he's very much a swindler. He's very much into money. But it's like, also, it's a cushy job. You get paid all this money. You do parlor tricks, and you don't have to do much of anything. And it's like, Skeeve's like, yeah, but I know like 4 spells. And Oz is like, yeah, and that's all you need. All we need to do is use a little bit of showmanship. And so they decide to travel to Kingdom and audition. And Skeeve uses his magic ability to change people's images, to make illusions. And he makes them all look like normal people and all that. And just basically puts on this big show number of, you know, I'm going to turn this human being into a dark demon. And all he does is actually turn off the magic and just show Oz and his power. And it's like, and here, this horse becomes a dragon, and wins basically literally on showmanship more than anything. And the king's like, oh, excellent, you're my new court magician. My first ruling is, this giant army from another kingdom is attacking us and coming for war. You will be the front line. Go stop them. And Skeeve's like, wait, what? Like, Skeeve's like, okay, no, we need to run. We need to never come back. And Oz is like, no, we kind of have to. I made all these deals with the money man of the kingdom, and we won't get any of the money unless we do blank and blank and blank. And so Oz decides, like, we're going to go to the bazaar, and we're going to find warriors who will fight alongside us and other magicians in this, and we will build an army to get. And it's like, Skeeve doesn't particularly want to do this, but if he agrees to go do that, and they end up going into this tavern that has an old friend of Oz named Gus, who is a gargoyle. And the bar is being attacked by a giant troll named a Big Crunch, who talks very monosyllabic and very dumb. He's basically causing all this trouble, and then Tananda walks through, and she's like, brother, what are you doing? And Big Crunch just turns to her and goes, oh, sister, I'm sorry. I think things went off book. And it turns out that this is a character he plays. He is a troll, but he's very intelligent, and most people think of trolls as dumb, so he just plays up the part. His real name is Chumley. And Chumley is Tananda's troll brother. And she and Chumley agree to help out. So does Gus and his pet fire-breathing salamander, who lives in the crevices of his stone. They also get help from an old archer. I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he comes from a planet known as Archera, who is literally known as the inventors of archery. They are the best archers in the world. He is also so old that the wind should kill him. But they agreed up. So the 8 of them are now off to fight this army of thousands. And that's the majority of the rest of the plot, is just the fighting of this. And this is by far my favorite book in the series. is one of my favorite books of all time. It's so well written and it's so interesting, and because Skeeve is so underpowered. Skeeve is very, very, very weak. He doesn't. He like I said, he knows 6 spells, and he knows 6 spells for basically the entire series. He never really learns new spells after the second book, but he manages to use the spells that he does know and able to manipulate things and change things. He ends up creating a fake giant army using just his illusion magic, and makes it seem like there are 1,000 of them when there are actuality 6. But because there are 6 super powerful beings, that can make it seem like there's even more of them because they're so strong they can the guy from Achara can shoot his arrows so fast and so quickly that it seems like there's hundreds of arrows coming at you at once from hundreds of archers, when it's really just one person shooting super fast. It's so big and so overwhelming, and there's a point where you literally think one of the main characters has died, and and Skeeve is just left kind of wrecked. Like, I still have to do this, I still have to fight, but I don't know how to keep going. And it's so well written, so well told. It's like legitimately like one of my favorite things ever. But as you can kind of guess, he succeeds because there's more books, and the way they succeed is even interesting. The way they succeed is by talking to the general of this group, who is known as Big Julie. It was a guy, but it's called Big Julie, and Big Julie, doesn't want to fight. He's being literally forced to it. He just wants to have a farm and live a peaceful life, and eventually him and Skeeve and Oz make a deal to pay off their debt and then give them land. So now Big Julie and his army have their own property and their own land. That was a really interesting way to overcome this odds, literally diplomacy. But yeah, it's a really strong second book. And then we get into the third book, which sadly is not going to be as good. Granted, it's one of those, did it even have a chance? Honestly, it could have. Unfortunately, this book goes a little bit more comedic. So the story starts off with Talanda wants to get Oz a birthday present. Excellent start for a book series, isn't it? So she convinces Skeeve to help her do this, but Talanda doesn't just want to get him anything. She wants to get him something extremely rare and exotic, and they end up on this planet called Jack. And Jack has people that are either extremely skinny or very overweight. And they find themselves there in the middle of this big celebration because they are in the city of Tahoe, which has recently won the big game against their dreaded rivals, Vegas. Tahoe, Vegas. And basically, Tananda sees the trophy that they won for getting the big game and loves it. And is like, I'm going to steal that, and we're going to give that to Oz. And convinces Skeeve to help her do that. The alarm goes off and Talanda gets captured, but Skeeve manages to escape. He travels back to Claw and gets Oz, and the two of them decide to go to Jink to rescue Tananda. Basically, in order to free Tananda, they have to defeat the they got to defeat the townspeople in the big game, which turns out to be just a variation of soccer with more violence. And so they get a bunch of people to help them. They get Chumley and Gus and General Badax, who is the leader of the Postletum army, and Big Julie, who is the leader of the opposing army, becomes their coach. And they also meet this woman named Marcia, who is the Vegas magician. She's the big court magician for the town of Vegas. And she's described as being extremely overweight, like ridiculously overweight. But she's also another court magician who has very little magic. She even has less than Skeeve. All of her magic comes from jewelry that she wears. And she wears, because she's so big, she wears multiple jewelries of everything. And she ends up becoming a bigger deal as the series goes on. At a later point, she ends up becoming Skeeve's apprentice, which is pretty cool. But they end up having the big game, and it's all about, out-cheating the opponents and being smarter, and it's okay. It gets a little ridiculous, and it's kind of a really grading down step from the second book, which was so interesting and so had such good levels and danger to it, to a soccer game as the sequel. It loses a little bit, unfortunately, but it's still got some stuff in it that I really like, and it's got some good comedy bits in throughout. And then we lead into the fourth book, which is called Hit or Myth. And at the very beginning of this book, Oz has left to go deal with a family matter at home, leaving Skeeve alone. The king of Postleton has called on Skeeve, and he's like, I need you to use your magic and pretend to be me, because I'm so tired, and I just need a vacation, and I need some rest. But I can't leave this kingdom without its ruler, so I need you to use your magic to pretend to be me. And Skeeve agrees. The king leaves without telling Skeeve about the impending royal wedding, or that he is never returning, because the king is getting the heck out of there. Skeeve is now stuck in this disguise and trying to find a way to stop Queen Hemlock, who's the name of this power-hungry queen who just wants more of a kingdom, wants to build. And we find out that she is being supported and helped out by the Planet Claus version of the mob. And I mean like the Godfather mob. And the leader of the Godfather mob is a man referred to as the Fairy Godfather. Yeah, it's like basically they're the big muscle behind Queen Hemlock getting what she wants and doing this and that. So it's like Skeeve's like, okay, I need to get them out of this situation so I can try to find the king to come back here and take his throne and stop Queen Hemlock. So he's like, okay, he goes up to the Fairy Godfather and he's like, what if I can offer you some more money than you could want? Because I know you are mad, because they were the main force behind the army in Book 2. And they are demanding reparations for the money they spent and got lost because of Skeeve's antics. Skeeve's like, alright, I can give you a place that has no law enforcement, no real gun controlling, and you will be rolling in dough for the rest of your existence. And Fairy Godfather's like, okay, and Skeeve hands him the D-Hopper, the dimensional hopper, and she takes him to the bazaar. Because the bazaar is only run by the Devilles. There's no law enforcement, there are no really any rules other than what they say is expected. And it's like, you can run protection, you can demand money from these guys and do the thing that the mom does, and there's nothing here to stop you from that. So the Fairy Godfather agrees and leaves and goes deals with that. Skeeve manages to find the king, and they manage to put the king back in place and stop the Queen Hemlock from forcing the marriage. But unfortunately, his plan to slow the mob down has only screwed up things for the bazaar. And the second half of the book is all about using different tactics and different methods to keep the mob from gaining a foothold in the bazaar any more than they already have. And it's a really interesting thing where it's like, between Skeeve and Oz, they're both playing both sides of this. So by the end, the Devilles are indebted to Skeeve and Oz, and then the mob is also indebted to Skeeve and Oz. So the mob give Skeeve and Oz two of their greatest mobsters. We basically give them two of the made men, and also give Skeeve his own mole, who turns out to be this woman named Bunny, who is the niece of the Fairy Godfather. And she doesn't ever actually live up to that role as a mole. She ends up becoming more of the assistant/accountant for Skeeve's ongoing business. And the bazaar gives Skeeve his own giant tent in the dead middle of the bazaar, so that that leads to its own pocket dimension that has a house and all these things you could ever want. And Skeeve and Oz decide to start a business using all the friends and all the connections and all the power they have now. And they create this company known as Myth Inc. And they solve problems and mysteries and do odd jobs and do different things to solve this. And that's where book 4 ends and goes on into more stuff like that. And honestly, that's a really good starting spot with this series. I don't need to go into too much about the later books because they're all different and all unique, and some work and some don't. If I'm going to recommend any of the later ones, there is one called The Sweet Mysteries of Life, where Green Hemlock comes back into play, and it's all about like them trying to force Skeeve to marry someone, and him trying to get out of it, but has like these 4 different women all trying to seduce him at the same time. It's really bizarre and kind of funny, but it's a weird series. It's got some really good comedic moments. Really, I love the way the characters are written. I love the fact that Skeeve is a hero who has very little power. He's very much an everyman character, but is able to overcome situations using his friends, using his intelligence, his creativity, his ability to think up ways to solve problems in different ways. The first 4 books are solid. Like, I love all 4 of them. Even the third one, which I was like, on. I'm always gonna be a little bit on it, but that's just because the other 3 of the 4 are so good and so well written. And they're short books. Each of these books is roughly at most 260 pages. So I'm like, the first book, you can buy the first 2 books in an omnibus, and it's like 500 pages. It's super fast and easy to read. And I highly recommend getting that omnibus. Because that's one of the nice things with this series. Is this series started out in 1977 and has had a lot of editions done. And you can find omnibuses for multiple books. There's an omnibus that's the first 5 books. There's a manga series that's all different adventures. There's a bunch of different styles. Because there's a lot of art styles. Like Skeeve, this is how I always think of Oz, as this big green monster here. But in later other art and other drawings, he looks more like this. And it's just like, okay, whatever. But, yeah, and it's just like, it's a long-running series. It started in 1977 and has made 21 volumes and is still running to today, even though the author passed away in 2008, unfortunately. But, thankfully, he had an apprentice, a co-writer named Jody Lynn Nye, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple weeks ago at WonderCon, and I was very happy to meet her. I did not know she was there, and I didn't expect to meet her. I was just checking out the booth that they had, and they had some of her books there, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And she voluntarily came out and just talked to me, and I asked her questions, she talked to me, and signed a couple books for me. I was like very happy for that. Yeah, it's like, and the nice thing is that she has continued both this series and one of his other series, and she understands his humor and does the right level of storytelling and comedic telling, and does some really good work with him. I'm very happy with the books that I've read that she's done with him, because there is another series by Aspirin that I really liked until he started co-writing with someone, and I will definitely talk about that series at some point. It was called The Fool's Company, and the first 3 books of that series are really good, and then he co-wrote books that, yeah, they were pretty awful. And thankfully it wasn't Nye, it was someone else. And I even told her this. It was like, I'm so happy that you understand his tone and his writing better than this person. And she's like, he's good at descriptions, he's not good at the comedy parts. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. So the Myth Adventure series is a really good long-running comedy series with goofiness and bizarreness, and it's good world building, and every single adventure can take place in these different things. There's a book that's all about going to Oz's home planet to find him, and you just see how all these things he says about Perfex are not necessarily true. And there's a murder mystery book that's all about finding out who's doing all these troubles at a mall. And it's like this giant version of the bazaar, but is a mall. It's like, okay, this is weird, but they're goofy and they're fun and they're fantasy, but every single chapter of all these books starts out with a quote, and they're all made up for the most part, but some of them are absolutely brilliant. And it's just, some are just yeah, I mean, it just manipulates the way the quotes, because they're not real, but they are hilarious. Like, numerical superiority is of no consequence in battle. Victory only goes to the best tactician. And it'll say, like, General A. Custard. Or, diplomacy is the weapon of a civilized warrior, Attila the Hun. And you're like, why these people? Why? And it's like, because it's a joke. They're not real quotes. But, uh, they're really funny. And it's sort of the thing of, like, I've read some stuff on Aspirin, and Aspirin was like, I kind of wish I hadn't done that. Because the fact that I did that and I made them up and you all laughed at them mean I have to keep doing it. And I didn't. I'm really kind of mad I did that, but I'm happy he did it. It's always a funny thing at the start of the chapter just to read this weird, bizarre quote that has nothing to do with anything. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun series. Got good characters, good descriptions, good story, good, just well told, and it's interesting the way it starts out and the way it went. Because the last book that I talked about, the one I mentioned on, which was the Sweet Myth Theories of Life, honestly felt like it was going to be the end of the series. And you could kind of tell that even Aspirin was thinking that might be the end of the series, because he didn't write anything for like 9 years. And it ends on a parting of ways. And the fact that the series kept going despite that parting of ways is still pretty impressive to me. So yeah, no, I do recommend the series. It honestly, if you can get your hands on the first 4 books, it's well worth it. But it's a nice variety of a series. It's definitely something I highly recommend. Oh, like the series overall, it's like definitely a 4.5 out of 5. It's like there's very few in the series that I'd actually consider bad. There's only one that I was not super happy with, and that one was still at least a 2.5 out of 5 for me. So yeah, overall, highly recommend the series. Happy reading, y'all.